This is Share the Vision, presented by the Resource Center, a discussion of the programs and services of the Resource Center and about issues related to individuals with disabilities. Today, it is my honor and privilege to spend a few minutes with Greg Bender, Director of Business Operations here at the Resource Center, on his final day of work under that title. Greg Bender, thank you for spending a few minutes with me, with our audience.
No problem, Dennis. My pleasure.
How long have you been here at the Resource Center under Director of Business Operations or similar titles?
Interestingly enough, today is the last day of my 26th year. I started on May 22nd, 1989. This is May 21st. So I am exactly 26 years.
Congratulations to
Thank you.
on your retirement. What does it mean, for those people who are not familiar with you and your work here, what does it mean to be the Director of Business Operations at this place?
Well, for the last 26 years, we basically have been trying to find jobs that will employ our client base. We serve all disabilities within Chautauqua County. Therefore, no one job fits all. We don't just make one thing. We make lots of things. And we deal with lots of customers, lots of different skills that are required because everybody has a different skill set and an ability to learn. And so we have always had a diverse group of customers, from obviously the federal government and the warfighter in the Iraq and Afghanistan and Bosnia-Herzegovina, the whole thing. We've dealt with those customers down to customers in local industry that just need something inspected and sorted. So we all different skill sets.
So many things to bring up with you in the time that we have together. But first, a few more terms, perhaps, Greg Bender, so that the listening audience will understand what it is you have been in charge of here, because sometimes it has been referred to as the work center or work centers, sometimes allied industries. These are all fundamentally the same thing.
Basically, yeah. Allied industries, interestingly enough, was a term that was given a department long before my time, and it was the tent pin department. We used to make tent pins for the federal government. And for some reason, they called that allied. And don't ask me who or why. But when I started in 1989, the term allied had morphed into the work center. And so for a while, we were the work center. Then we tried to market ourselves as Allied Industries, and we actually made up a logo and made up stationery and letterhead, and we tried, maybe not in the pure marketing sense, but basically as best we could, but it never really took. We were always the Achievement Center. We were always the ARC. We were always the Resource Center, and we basically gave up. So we've been the Resource Center's manufacturing division officially for the last 20 years. Internally, we market ourselves as, we talk about Allied. Everybody knows this is the Allied building, but Allied includes two other buildings. It includes the building up at 401 East Chestnut in Dunkirk, and then we have space in Seneca Larkin building in Buffalo. And we also have a mobile crew that works in both the North County and the South County that does custodial work for people. So it's a pretty broad term.
Who are the people who work for you in the manufacturing division of the Resource Center?
Obviously, we are manufacturing. That's a good term. We basically consider everything we do manufacturing. So we look at every job, whether it's custodial, whether it's a pure sewing job, whether it's a pure sorting job or a packaging job, it is manufacturing. So we have, on any given day, probably 325 to 350 production workers doing various jobs throughout the three facilities and the mobile work crew. And then we also have the management staff that makes sure there's materials around, that makes sure there's equipment available. So you have supervisors and all that.
Why does the Resource Center, an agency whose goal is to help persons with disabilities, have a manufacturing division?
Well, it's difficult. A lot of our participants require very special supports to be able to get to work, to be able to understand what they have to do with work, to be able to handle the social skills involved in being in a work setting. And so a lot of those requirements, most commercial entities, most non-work center facilities, they can't afford to have the supports. to put that in their facility. And therefore, it becomes too hard for the local businesses to hire our people. So basically, I have always said that we're manufacturing, pure and simple. We have the same problems as everybody else. Getting people in the door, making sure they do a good job, making sure the quality's right. And then, oh, by the way, I have to go to my therapy session from 10 to 11:30 today. Oh, by the way, I have to go to my psychologist appointment. So we have all the problems a regular manufacturing organization has, plus you have to deal with individuals that require supports, which is why we exist. If the people could find jobs in the local community and be supported what they call natural supports, so that their next-door neighbor takes them to work and their other next-door neighbor picks them up from work and somebody on the work floor takes them under their wing. Those are called natural supports that exist for a lot of people, but they don't exist for far many more. And so the work centers are required. I guess they're a required evil. I mean, we really don't want to exist. We'd rather everybody be in the commercial marketplace. Number one, there's not enough business in our local economy. We're no longer a manufacturing-based economy. We're a service-based economy. So it's a different mentality now.
I want to get back to that particular point about the work centers a little later in this interview. But you told me as we were setting up the equipment here today to do this broadcast, and we are at the manufacturing division, the allied area of the Resource Center, just behind the Raymond Building on Jones and Gifford Avenue as we speak. You said that as we were getting this together that you began your career in manufacturing. You'd always been in manufacturing before you came here, and you started with Malleable Iron.
Malleable Iron, Jamestown Malleable Iron on Tiffany Street in Faulkner. We were a division of Blackstone, and that's where my first employment was. I was a time study technician. Malleable Iron paid piece rates, which require a lot of support from time study engineers. So that's how I got into the manufacturing business.
Time study, how long it takes to accomplish a particular
Correct,
task.
and that therefore how much somebody gets paid.
So you worked there and a few other firms in the immediate Jamestown area in this vicinity.
Correct.
Before coming to the Resource Center.
Correct. Automatic voting machine on Jones and Gifford, probably 500 yards from where we're sitting right now. And then also American Sterilizer. American Sterilizer was at the airport. It used to be AMSCO XL. It had a bunch of different names.
So how did your perspective on making things change, Greg Bender, as you came into the environment where many, if not most, if not all of the employees who were doing the work that needed to be done had some sort of special needs?
Interestingly enough, when I was an industrial engineer for AVM, I actually used the Resource Center. The work center wasn't located here. It was located at the old Home and Garden building across from the post office. They had a manufacturing work site there. This is back in the mid-'70s, and so this is before they moved into this building. But I used the work center, the Resource Center, as a way to get some parts sorted for automatic voting machines. So I had a little inkling. I really didn't have a great inkling, obviously. I didn't know the nuances. I didn't know to the extent the type of supports that people needed to do manufacturing. So, I mean, I basically, what I always turned myself, I was just real-world manufacturing, not rehab. And there is a distinction. Some people run manufacturing plants for agencies like us, and they've come up through the social works, through the human resources fields, and so they have a different perspective. Somebody who's always been manufacturing has a little different perspective, and we have to learn the nuances of rehabilitation.
So 26 years later now, Greg Bender, what is your perspective today on the ability of persons with disabilities to perform in a manufacturing environment?
They're like you and I. I mean, all of them are unique, number one. All of them really like to do certain jobs, and they don't like other jobs. All of them have certain skills that they're really good at, that they really enjoy doing, and there's no one thing fits all, which lends itself to the kind of business we've been forever. That is, various customers, various types of jobs, always looking for something to keep people busy. For a long time, we did just one job when I started, and the people, I don't want to say they got bored, but they got frustrated because every day they had to look at the same kind of materials and they had to do the same job, so it was very repetitive. So we learned long ago that work needs to be work, but it also needs to be something that's challenging and something varied. So the people are pushed to do as much as they can. We try to say, this is what you're supposed to be doing, just like a regular factory worker.
I want you to be straightforward with me on the following, because I think you have a lot to be proud of over this 26-year period. Greg Bender, how much growth has there been in the manufacturing part of the Resource Center in the time that you have run it?
Well, we started back in '89. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we had two different divisions then. Custodial did not even exist. And so we had the government work and the subcontracting or local business. And back then, I would say we did probably $1.5 million a year in government work, and probably in the neighborhood of $300,000-$400,000 in local work.
So under $2 million a year.
Under $2 million a year. Now, that being said, back then there was a tremendous amount of New York State support money to help run the workshop, because it's a big building. It has expenses. We were a bigger program than that, but our actual outside contribution of revenue was probably under $2 million.
What is it today?
Well, let's go back to 2011.
What was its peak, maybe?
At the peak, 2011 was our peak for a lot of different reasons. You know, the moons aligned, and the sun and the moon didn't come near each other, and all that stuff. But we basically shipped $53 million of government work out of this facility. And then we also did probably another $6 million in all the other work in terms of custodial and that. So we probably did close to $60-some million in sales.
How do you feel when you relate those numbers?
I mean, they're pretty big, aren't they? I mean, they're kind of crazy. How many plants in Jamestown ship $53 million in 1 year? I mean, Crawford's at its heyday didn't, probably. You have to go to like Cummins and MRC to get numbers that big. We were probably, and at that time, all those companies were small, getting smaller. So we probably were the second or third largest manufacturer in the whole county.
You're proud?
Oh, absolutely. It was a great achievement. The people, we've been fortunate over the years. We have a great staff that really work extraordinarily hard for two reasons. One reason is they know who we support, why we're here. They understand. They get the mission. You know, the mission is very specific. And so they get the mission. That's one reason that they want to be here and work hard. The other reason is we support the U.S. warfighter. And so when we see a soldier going down the streets of Fallujah with a U.S. Marine Corps IFAC on their hip, they can say, that's made at my plant. That's pretty darn good.
How did you achieve this growth?
Well, we had a retirement party, and I had to talk a little bit about it. And a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time. We did a good job of the projects we got when we got them. And so we became kind of a go-to facility for the organizations that need this kind of work. U.S. Army, Natick, Massachusetts had a research and engineering division. We did a lot of work for them. So because of that, we became a go-to organization. And so consequently, when they had a project they needed to have done, they would come to us and say, what do you think? Can you do this? And we would, we can manufacture this. We'd tweak it. We'd change it. That was our marketing. We didn't have a sales. We had no salesman. Our sales program was do a good job, give them more than they expect, do everything on time, and they'll come back. And for year after year after year, they just kept coming back. So we peaked for a lot of different reasons. We had a few large projects that required us kitting projects. So buying components that we didn't make and marrying them up with components that we did make. So we were buying very expensive military hardware, and we were combining that with the materials we made and putting it into a big kit. Well, some of those kits, one kit was $88,000.
Wow. So
it doesn't take long to have big numbers. Consequently, we've invested a lot of infrastructure in our organization. We have a full MRP system and
MRP,
manufacturing requirements planning. So it's a term that they use for controlling your inventory, controlling your production.
Speak to us for a moment about how the relationship began between the United States government and places like the manufacturing division of the Resource Center where persons with disabilities are employed, because there is a special link there, is there? And I got my fingers tied together.
You do.
Here.
Very, very impressive. There's a program called the Javits Wagner O'Day Program, JWAD for short. It now has a new name. An act hasn't changed, but they have a tagline for it called the Ability One Program. The Ability One Program is basically a special program for special people. It basically uses the buying power of the federal government to employ the severely disabled or the blind. And so it's a set-aside program. It's considered part of the small business world of government contracting, although it's a not-for-profit portion, so it's not really small business. But it basically, the government has a requirement, and if the Resource Center can make that project, and we can do it for a quality that's acceptable and the price is acceptable, negotiated, we get to do that project as long as they want it, forever. So it takes it out of the commercial marketplace. So in one way, it hurts possibly small businesses, but it employs, on a nationwide basis, 50,000 people, 50,000 disabled people that would not have a job.
That's not all you've done, though, here in terms of government work. That's not all you have. I think of Laurel Hotelling for a moment, who works, is well known to all of us here in the environment of TRC, who works in your Chestnut Street Work Center in Dunkirk. And she's often talking about doing boxes and putting things in boxes. That's a different kind of work.
That's a different kind of work. It's called our subcontracting division. They do work for local businesses. So what Laurel specializes in is working for organizations in the Dunkirk area, Carriage House, the former Carriage House, Cliff Star. We did work for Cliff Star, Dunkirk Ice Cream, or it's called Fieldbrook. And so that kind of work was done in the Dunkirk plant. And in Jamestown, we do work for organizations like Clark Boxit, Jamestown Container, Dalston Roll Form. So those jobs are what we call our subcontracting.
What does it mean to individuals with disabilities to be able to have this work?
I can't tell you the number of times the people come in to my office to show me their paycheck. They are so proud of what they make. Now, most of the people do not require that money to live on, but a job is everything to everybody. When you say you're Dennis Webster, you say you're Dennis Webster, and I work on a radio station, and this is what I do. I'm Greg Bender. I work for the Resource Center. Everything that's about our person revolves around our job or our family. And so to them, it's very important to have a job. It's a connection. It's where they have their social life. Many of them do not have the ability to go downtown shopping and meeting their friends for lunch, or go to the American Legion, or go to Erie to go to the mall. I mean, they do get to do that, but it's usually in a very limited basis. Their social life, in many cases, revolves around their job. So not only are they proud that they get to earn money, but their best friend sits next to them.
What does it mean to the Resource Center to have this manufacturing division? What is the value to TRC of having this?
Well, over the years, because of the volume of government work we've done, we've produced a lot of revenue for the agency in an era that the support dollars from the state and federal government have diminished and become less and less and less. We were able to support the agency with the margins that we earned on the jobs we do. We don't always earn money on every job. Many of the jobs we do for subcontracting, for say, we know we can't make a profit on because there's just not enough margin in the project. But the government project, we have profit or margin that supports the agency. So for a lot of years, it is the one program that they could count on.
I say all of this, and we come to this point in the interview, Greg Bender, on your last day as the Director of Business Operations for the Manufacturing Division of the Resource Center, because anyone who's been in the environment of the Resource Center or listened to this program over the last year or so knows that this entire concept that you have been responsible for and developed over 26 years is now being threatened.
Correct.
What are the threats? How do you feel about that?
Well, the threats are very real. The threats are a reaction. Every state runs their programs differently. So we can only speak for New York, but we know where the pressures are coming from. States like Oregon, Rhode Island had systems that were not as robust in terms of regulation as New York State. New York State regulates, as everybody knows who lives here, they do a very good job at regulating everything. Therefore, the New York State work centers, I don't want to say in every case, but 99 out of 100 do a tremendous job in supporting the disabled workers and a population in their particular geographic area to the nth degree. There's redundancy upon a redundancy in terms of making sure nobody's taking advantage of anybody. Mm-hmm. That's not the case in every state. Consequently, the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, has been on a crusade to make sure that the workers in work centers get treated fairly under the Americans with Disabilities Act. They're actually using the Americans with Disabilities Act, the act that was put in place to protect people on the outside, and they're using that to coerce states to close work centers like the resource centers, Allied Industries. And closing is a euphemism. They don't mean closing. They just mean they're not going to give you any money anymore. So if you want to run a work center, the only way you're going to run it is on your own money. Anybody that's been in the work center business knows that unless you have large government orders, which we happen to have, you can't earn enough money doing work on subcontracting. There's not enough margin in that kind of work. Therefore, most places are opting they have to close eventually. There's a 6-year plan to close all work centers in New York. But it doesn't mean you can't have them. It just means they're not going to give you any money.
Does that make you very uneasy leaving this work today and knowing that 6 years from now it could all evaporate?
It could, except that I know the mission of the board of directors and the staff of the Resource Center are committed to keeping it open. And basically how we're committed to keeping it open is we're going to support it. We're going to support it through our federal work. We're going to make enough margin in our federal jobs to be able to pay the bills for everything. In the old days, and I say the old days, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the work center, the allied, the non-government work was separated from the affirmative business. Affirmative business is what we call our government division. They were separate financially. They ran separately. Technically, they still do. But the way we're looking at it is we're looking at it as one large program that all the revenues are going to be compared against all the expenses, and at the bottom line is we have to be at zero or better than zero or we'll be out of business. We think we can do it.
Is it important to keep work centers like this open for the consumers of the Resource Center?
I think it's anybody that's been here, anybody that's been in any work center. I mean, you can pick any individual and ask them on the floor, would they like to make more money? Yes. Would they like to be in the commercial world, in the environment outside working in a non-work center? Most of all want to do it. The bottom line is there's not enough jobs. The only way they can be out in the real world is to have somebody supporting them. In our facility, which they call a congregate facility, we're efficient. We have 100 people and 10 support staff. If you had 100 people out into the real world, you're probably talking 50 support staff. Who's paying for that? How are you going to afford to do that? The commercial entities are not going to pay for a job coach. Somebody's got to pay for that job coach. So from the standpoint of efficiency and economics, we make sense. I understand that it's not for everybody. Some people, no matter what, they want to be on the outside. They want to work for McDonald's. We support that. We want them to go there. But we want to be available. So if McDonald's only works them 2 days a week, they could come here for 3 days a week rather than sit home and watch soap operas.
Before the time is completely exhausted, one other subject going to take a real sharp right turn here because you are also appreciated in the Resource Center community because of your love of golf.
A little bit.
And your connection with the Kappa tournament, now known as the TRC Classic. You've been the chairperson of that for?
I'm not this year, but probably of the 19 years, probably 17 of them.
So you have a love of the game.
I have a love of the game. It's the only thing I still do well. That's what I tell my wife. I don't do anything else good. I'm a pretty good golfer.
And you fused that with a commitment to help persons with disabilities through this major fundraising event for the TRC Foundation each year. How did that happen?
It actually started with the founders of the tournament. Sam Restivo was the founder of the tournament. It was his idea, along with Joe Caprino, and they said, hey, let's go to Carl and ask Carl Kappa if we can use his name to run a golf tournament.
Okay, Sam Restivo ran this place, Resource Center, for a time.
He was an interim executive director. When I started, he was the HR director, and he was responsible for bringing me to the Resource Center.
Joe Caprino ran Caprino's Complete Home Furnishings, major businessman in the Jamestown area.
On the board of the Resource Center.
Carl Kappa had Crawford Furniture.
Crawford Furniture. And
so those are the players.
Those are the players. And Sam went to Carl, and Carl was on the newly formed TRC Foundation board. And so the TRC Foundation is only 20 years old. And so Carl was on the board. Sam went to Carl and said, hey, we want to have a fundraiser for the foundation. We want to have a golf fundraiser. At that time, there weren't a lot of them. There were a few. The Italian-American, the George Batitis. There weren't a lot of them. Now there's many, many more. So Sam's idea was to go to Carl. Carl said yes, and Carl jumped in with both feet. I mean, he said, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. So for the first 2 years or year, maybe, I think the first 2 years, Sam was the chairman, and I was tapped because I was the resident golfer in the Resource Center to be on the committee.
How much money has the TRC Classic, under its various names, generated for TRC Foundation?
A little over $1.32 million net. So in 19 years, we've taken in, actually it's 18 years because this is the 19th. So in 18 years, we've taken in $1.32 million, an average of, what is that, $65,000 a year for a one-day golf tournament in Jamestown, Chautauqua County. Unheard of. I would say at a good golf tournament in this community, historically, if they make $20,000 in one-day tournament, that's a tremendous day. And we set the benchmark where we made over $100,000 4 years in a row.
Do you ever get the sense that success is attracted to you?
No, I don't. No, I don't. And neither does my wife, by the way.
But here you built the manufacturing division of this from $2 million to $60. And have shepherded a golf tournament along that's raised on average $65,000 every day that it happens, one day a year.
Yeah.
This is extraordinary.
I've been very fortunate. I mean, with regards to the golf tournament, I don't raise anything other than asking people to donate, and the Jamestown community and the people that support the Resource Center step up. So I kind of help herd the cats. That's really all I do. I kind of herd the cats. From the standpoint of the work center and the work we do here, we were fortunate to have the right people in the right place at the right time. Now you can say, yeah, you put them there, so yes, okay, I did that. But the boots on the ground are not me. Again, I'm just kind of managing, and the people doing the heavy lifting are the ones that need the accolades.
Greg Bender, last day as Director of Business Operations for the Resource Center. What next for you, your family, your life?
Well, I've got right around 10 days to get ready to go on what we are calling Dawn and Greg's Excellent Adventure.
Your wife.
My wife, Dawn, and I are taking a 3-month trip across the northern part of the United States, up through Canada, into Alaska, back down through Canada, doing the West Coast, coming back through the national parks, and we hope to be back around September 1st, give or take a couple weeks. And so my retirement plan has always been linked to that. Mm-hmm. It's not I'm retiring to go play golf.
Well, beyond 3 months?
Beyond 3 months, I mean, one of the things I've never been able to do is go to Grandparents' Day. That's a big thing.
How many children do you have?
We have 5 kids.
Wow. How many grandchildren?
12.
Whoa. You're going to be going to a lot of events.
Well, there's only a few of them left to do that, but yeah, it'll be fun.
Are they around here or elsewhere?
We have 5. We have 5 that are in the immediate area. We have 3 that are in Bradford, and then the remainder are in Texas.
It's time for us to close, so I will just say thank you for this opportunity on your final day as Director of Business Operations here, and thank you for all you have done for this place.
You're welcome, Dennis. Thank you.
Greg Bender, my guest today on Share the Vision on the final day of his Directorship of Business Operations for the Resource Center. A footnote to today's program, Todd Frangione, who's worked in another capacity at the Resource Center for some time, is now the Director of Business Operations there. And thank you for sharing the vision today.